Hello, everyone. My name is Stéphane Leblanc. I'm the founder and CEO of the International Center for Conscious Leadership. My mission is to be a catalyst for the transformation of leaders and the elevation of consciousness around the world. It's a real blessing for me today to be welcoming three of my best friends, but also certainly three of my wisest friends on the call with me. On this call, Inspired Leadership, New Stories for Humanity to Thrive. I would like to introduce you to three guests that I have today with me. The first one is Anneloes Smitsman. Anneloes is originally from the Netherlands and she now lives in Mauritius. Anneloes traveled around the world, including South Africa and Australia, where she learned a lot of wisdom. Anneloes is the founder of the EARTHwise Centre and also the author of an amazing book called Love Letters from Mother Earth. Anneloes is one of the wisest people that I know, and she has been coaching me for the last several months, transferring some of her wisdom to me so I can rise in my own consciousness and lead people to rise in their own consciousness around the world. So welcome, Anneloes. The second person I'd like to introduce is someone who came into my life about a year ago by pure synchronicity, and she was a real gift when she came. Her name is Michelle Holiday. Michelle is originally from the US, has worked around the world, and is now living in Montreal with her family. She's the author of an amazing book called The Age of Thrivability. Michelle is also one of those wise people. You know, when she speaks and it describes to me her principles, it really sounds to me like business poetry. And I love poetry in general, so it's always beautiful to have a conversation with Michelle. Welcome, Michelle. And the third person I would like to introduce is Bhaskar Goswami. I met Bhaskar about 5 years ago when I was a senior executive in a large international company, and I was a broken man. I was broken psychologically, overstressed. My body was broken. I was in very poor physical shape, and I was struggling also spiritually. And Bhaskar was introduced to me as a well-being expert, you know, professor of yoga and meditation. And he started to give me private yoga lessons. And since then, we have developed a very deep friendship. And I consider Bhaskar one of my wisest friends, my soul brother. And Bhaskar has been with me for the last 5 years, through the ups of my life, through the downs of my life, when I was facing darkness, always ready to provide some of his wisdom to allow me to thrive. So this will be an amazing call. And the way we're going to run the call is we're going to have three fundamental questions being asked to my three guests. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A where everyone is going to be able to ask them questions and also provide their comments. We're going to follow the same order to answer the question to have a bit of order and a bit of organization. So Michelle will be the first one answering the question. Then we'll follow up with Bhaskar, and then we'll end with every question with Anneloes. So the first question, Michelle, I would like to ask you is, you know, there's a lot going on in the world, in our own lives, but also in the life of all humans, you know, as a collective. What is being asked of us by life at this specific moment?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stéphane. Thanks for having us all and bringing a nice group together. So my first thought about this question, what's being asked of us, is that each of us has our own answer to that. Each of us is being asked something particular, something specific by life that we have to listen for and tune into. But my work is focused on the common thread across all of our experiences. And what I'm sensing in my conversations with people, in my research, in my work with organizations and communities, is that the call right now is to recognize life, to reconnect with life. And I got into this work about 20 years ago when I started to notice that the story we have, the story we're taught in business schools in particular, as Jennifer mentioned, she's in school. But in society in general, we have a story that tells us that everything operates like a machine, especially organizations, especially businesses, but economies and even communities. And it's so pervasive that it's even hard to recognize that story. But it's it's present. And it tells us that we're separate from each other, from nature, from the organizations. We're just human resources to be put into the machine and churned in some way and spit out, along with a product that goes to an external customer. And nature doesn't come into this equation. Our passions and our own aliveness and the human spirit doesn't come into that story at all. So I started to notice that that story was really leading us down a disastrous path. And my opinion is that it's at the root of all the major challenges and struggles that humanity faces. So we're being called to recognize that that story, the mechanistic and reductionist story, is not complete. It's not all wrong, but it's not complete. And that there is also life and aliveness, and that our role in the world is not only as mechanics and engineers re-engineering the organization, but it is as gardeners and stewards even. So this is the call that we need to listen to, really, the call of life to recognize the aliveness in ourselves, in our families, in our communities, in our organizations, and ask, how can we create the conditions for life to thrive? What would create more aliveness in this moment, in this team, in this organization? How can we serve life more fully in our actions together? Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Michelle. Then I'm going to go to Bhaskar. What is being asked, in your opinion, of us by life now?
Just to be blunt and direct about it, we officially crossed the threshold in humanity recently. These are evil times we live in. It's no longer quirky or funny or idiotic or entertaining. It is literally the dictionary definition of evil times. When children are being separated from their families and put in cages, and the rest of the world just sits complacently and compliantly, we're in a whole different place right now. As a humanity. And really objectively, the way I see it, there seems to be 5 options that's open to us. One is to keep it going as it is. And there's a very strong chance of ending up in a dystopia, like an Orwellian dystopia. Another option is when we realize that all the petitioning and all the campaigning and all the marching and all that stuff is absolutely useless. It hasn't done anything meaningful. There comes a time to revolt. And when we go into revolution, there's 2 kinds. One is a violent kind, where there's a lot of bloodshed, and it's just going to be a horrific scenario. Some may even cynically call it population control. And the other option is a silent revolution, like the one that Gandhi did in India, what's called Satyagraha, the movement of truth, where all people decide to not collaborate and cooperate with a system that can condone such evil. So that's where we find ourselves. We must be realistic in where we find ourselves. There are some utopic scenarios out there where Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos get together and create some fantastic technology that solves all our problems, or even more fantastic, that we suddenly have this euphoric awakening and as a humanity and collaborate and co-create. But really, I think what humanity calls for us right now is to really toughen up, because this ride's going to get bumpy. Not to be negative about it, but that's just where we find ourselves right now. We are heading into times which are really not favoring thrivability at this time. So as individuals, it becomes very important that we do our part in being the highest version of ourselves so that we are ready for what's about to arise.
Thank you, Bhaskar, for this wake-up call. And then I'd like to go to Anneloes to answer the same question. Anneloes, what is being asked of us by life at this moment?
Thanks, Stefan. I like to build on what both what Michelle was saying and Bhaskar was saying. So on the one hand, holding the stewardship and custodianship, that is really to come into a whole new way of being together, which is really also a wake-up call to grow our consciousness. To really stand for that collective thrivability. And that means to become really a state attractor for the world and future that we want and that we need. And at the same time, Bhaskar's warning about really understanding the realities that we are faced with right now, which requires a kind of conscious and awake activism in a way that we haven't done before. Yeah? And so it's also, that starts, at least for me, I feel fundamentally with the question about what is the kind of species that we want to be? What is the story that we're telling ourselves? Are we really this kind of species that just destroys our habitats and that divides our families? And remembering that, we are all indigenous to this planet. We are all children of Mother Earth. So, who are we truly as a species? Who are you? Where does your story fit into that? And, what narrative are you going to be part of? And then at the same time, we need to learn a lot more. There are new skills, there are new competencies that we need to master that are important for these times. And that means also be intelligent, understand the systems in which we're operating, find the leverage points for the greatest positive impacts, find whole new ways also to consciously network. Yeah, and really remember that we need to do this from a place of inspiration and from a place of beauty and from love, that we truly stand for that. Because if we are uniting only based on fear and reactively and anger, then we are going to drain our internal and external resources. So I have seen in my own life, in working not just with individuals, but organizations, with communities, in large collective processes, that when we truly come together in a shared vision and we really, feel deeply in our heart and we bring forth the best of who we are, that tremendous change is possible. But it is a change that requires a long breath, a deep commitment. And in the last 2 days, for example, I've been on the phone a lot with the indigenous grandmothers of Europe. Yeah? And we were speaking about how important it is also to bring, for each of us, to bring our grandparents, our ancestors forth, and to see the common roots of all our ancestors, to see where that unites. And that we as women as well, we have a particular role at this time, together with the men, but to really, call the circle forth, call forth the circle of life, where we honor that unity and diversity. So yes, these are challenging times, but these are also absolutely amazing times to be awake, in a way that we haven't before. All the feedback that we are getting in our worlds about what's dying and collapsing also is an opportunity to learn in whole new ways. And, at least in my community of people from around the world, I am really touched and I'm really inspired and grateful how many of us are hearing this call and really bringing forth the best of who we are and becoming the state attractor to shift the gravitational pull away from destructiveness into thrivability.
Thank you, Anneloes. I was just reflecting on all what you three guys have said, and I don't speak Chinese, but I read that in China, the character for the word crisis also is the same word for opportunity. So often in a crisis, there is an opportunity to transform. And I also believe that every breakthrough is preceded by a severe breakdown. So maybe some of the breakdowns we're going through in society could hold the seed for a complete transformation. So let's go to the next question. So I'm going to go back to Michelle. And the question here is what is your practice, Michelle, of discernment about which story you're living into and feeding every day?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have some personal practices of meditation and journaling and walking with my dogs, especially. I also have a practice of engaging in creative conversation with others. And my belief is that we need each other in these times. We need each other to help discern what's most thrivable, what's the best path forward, how do we find meaning in these difficult times and in these wonderful times. So, a large part of my work is around the art of hosting. This is a community of practice that I belong to, the art of hosting conversations about things that matter and that lead to lasting change. And these are methods to bring people together in creative conversation, but also a philosophy that any conversation is a living system, a living entity that can be hosted and cultivated and stewarded like a family, like a community. And so we can use it as a practice ground to discern what's most alive for us as individuals, what's most alive for us as a group, and even more broadly as a community, to listen for the voice of the whole. So I have personal practices and I have collective practices that I bring in my work to others, to groups, communities, organizations.
Thank you, Michelle. So Bhaskar, same question. What is your practice of discernment about which story you're living into and feeding?
I'll qualify this answer by saying that the way I see it as an analogy, intelligence is like a knife and wisdom is like the hand that holds the knife. And we have developed very sharp intelligence. The knife is very sharp, yet the wisdom that's holding it might not be at the same level. And wisdom is simply a result of consciousness. The more we're conscious of, the more experientially aware we are. And that's where the wisdom comes from. So fundamentally, what we're having is a crisis in consciousness. So, and it's a faculty that can be developed, just like the body can be developed. And of course, meditation, mindfulness practices are at the heart of the fundamental practice. And also being in a physical condition that's not distracting you would help a lot. So having an easeful body, and also to reduce the amount of noise in one's life. There's so much out there that's just shouting for our attention. You know, our most precious commodity is not money or time, it's our attention. So to really minimize distraction and focus on what are absolutely fundamental to my well-being and the well-being of those around me is a big part of my practice. The most important practice, however, for me would be keeping uplifting company. That's, I think, it's what in yoga they call Sangha, to be in a company of people like us, you know, like the people I see before me. This has a way of increasing my inspiration, my own vibration, my own level of consciousness. And this is how we can really serve each other. There's never been a more important time to practice together and to dialogue together. So this is a part of the practice.
Thanks you, Bhaskar. And as you know, I've discovered the power of a Sangha. And for me, it's like a community, calm unity. You know, we come together as a group. So there's a lot of power in that. Thank you. And Anneloes, you know, what is your own practice of discernment about which story you're living into and feeding?
Thank you. It's based on a methodology which I've shared in my TED Talk called the Vector of Love. And so for myself, you know, I apply that always. I'll share a little bit about that. What it means to be a vector of love, yeah, is that it is based on 3 fundamental questions. So if you take the vector as an arrow, it also, a vector, the beautiful thing is when you stretch a vector out in all dimensions, it doesn't lose its intrinsic property. So it starts with that clarity of intention and purpose. Yeah. And then there are 3 questions I always ask myself. And that is, first one is, what's my point of origin? Where am I standing right now? And that's important, because if I don't know in the landscape of where I am, then I also don't know what I'm feeding, what narrative, where my focus is. So what's my point of origin? And am I really standing in our common roots, our common humanity? The second one is then to understand, okay, what am I reaching for? What am I focusing on? Because that helps me to clarify, you know, what my attention is going to. And the third one is really to explore what's the depth of my reach. So how far can I reach in to our, you know, where we unify? Yeah, how far can I reach into my resourcefulness of love? And then as this vector, how far can I reach out to really connect with the same essential potentials in each and every one of us? So that's my discernment, because then I can really determine where is my impact and what am I feeding and what am I contributing to.
While you 3 were answering the question, you know, in this day and age where we are all about modernity, technology, I think all of you three in some way refer to ancient practices, hosting. Michel was talking about hosting. If you go back from what I know in the old tribes, there was a lot of dialogue, presence. Bhaskar talked about Sangha community. And to me, the most ancient practice is love. Anneloes. So I think, I think there's a lot of signs that maybe we need to go back to basics about the way humans used to be together. And I think, Anneloes, you've done a lot of work with communities, tribes, and ancient, the natives. So we're going to continue the journey, but I think there's a lot of something that emerged into me to go back to being a human, the basic principle of being human. So the last question, a very important one, I'll go back to you, Michel, is what is something that we can do that would empower all of us, humanity, to thrive together?
As I answer that, I want to offer something that weaves together all of the perspectives that the four of us are bringing, because they're all needed. And as we each figure out what can we do going forward, I think it's useful to understand how these four perspectives fit together and how we can weave them together in our own lives. So just to reconnect with the story of how the four of us came together. And Stefan, you asked us if we each had one word to describe what's needed in the world. And mine was story. A story of wholeness. And this is a core characteristic of living systems. And Bhaskar's was practice. And that this is kind of the individual drive to make your own contribution. And this is a core characteristic of living systems, that there is also diversity within wholeness, within unity. And that has to be cultivated as well. Stefan, your word was love. That we need to be together in relationship, in meaningful and free-flowing and open relationship. And that's another core characteristic of living systems. We have to tend to the relationships that we're in, the spaces between us, both the intangible and the tangible, the infrastructures. How do those infrastructures serve us well as we try to create the conditions for more aliveness? And then, Anneloes, your word was wisdom. And even alchemy. And this to me connects with the essence of life itself and its power to enable thriving. We do not and cannot control and manage life as engineers. We can only create those first three fertile conditions, the conditions of individual thriving, of open and free-flowing structures of relationship, and of wholeness, of a story of wholeness that we can all belong to and contribute to. And in that way, we can listen to the wisdom of life and allow it to flow through and create thriving at every level for the individuals, for groups and organizations, customers, community, and biosphere. So I wanted to bring that back in so that it's clear that we aren't just one voice after another. There's some wonderful intention behind bringing the four of us together, and there's a coherence behind everything that we're saying. It all goes together. So your question is, what can we each do? And I go back to conversation. I find that we really do need each other in these times, and we need each other in meaningful conversations about things that matter. So the more that we can ask bigger questions of each other and of ourselves, the more we're likely to get to more meaningful questions, more meaningful answers, and to meaningful change. So in the next meeting that you're in, can you think of a deeper question? What more is possible here with this group? What are we uniquely capable of contributing to the world? What could we do in this gathering? What small thing that would make it feel more alive? Could we bring a plant in the center of our sterile conference room? Could we sit in a circle? Could we stand and move around for a few minutes? There's so many small things that can connect us with our own aliveness that then open the door to more and more. So that would be my recommendation for what we can do. Come together in meaningful conversation about bigger questions that connect us to our aliveness and our capability to create the conditions for life to thrive.
I think we need to hug each other more often. That's what we need to do in meeting rooms. You know, thank you, Michelle, for weaving everything like you did before. When you said we have to ask big questions, I read recently, some people ask why, and some people ask why not. You know, why can't humanity thrive? Why is humanity supposed to survive? And we're going to continue with the answers of our two colleagues here. But that's a question I ask myself all the time. Why can't we thrive? All of us. You know, why do we even teach our kids in school that it's all about surviving? You know, so that's, to me, it's a question. Why not?
Mm-hmm. And just if I can add to that, the question that comes even more often is how.
Yeah.
And Peter Block has a wonderful book called The Answer to How is Yes. and he means a few things by that. Partly he's rejecting our quickness to jump to solutions to how before we've really explored what's going on and what different lens do we need and what got us here in the first place and what do we care about and bigger questions like that. Don't jump to the how question before you're really ready for it. Otherwise, you'll solve too small a problem. So this is another one. Spend some time in what and who and where and when and why before you ask how.
That's really cool. Before you get too practical, it's okay to dream a bit. I like it. So let's go to Bhaskar. You know, what is something we can do together, all of us, that empowers us, humanity, to thrive?
You know, this question brings back a memory for me. Some of you may know, I co-steward an organization called Daana, where we bring wellness into communities, and I'm a yoga teacher. So I went to my mentor and I asked her, you know, I really want yoga to be taught properly, but of course it's an open source system, so anybody can come and teach. How can we make it accessible to all teachers and students and maintain the integrity of this amazing ancient healthcare system? And she just looked me straight in the eye and she said, you can't. All you can do is teach properly, and hopefully others will get informed and inspired by that. So in that same way, I don't know what we can do as a humanity. I really don't know what we are going to do, really. It's a big unknown, but I do know what I can do. And from my perspective, the best I can do is to show up in the highest version of myself and support and inform and inspire those who are also willing to come in that direction. So it's again, I come back to a personal practice that basically creates a sense of healthy body, peaceful mind, compassionate heart, and really to develop and become a vortex of sorts. Or another way to look at it, become like a light bulb in a dark room or a candle that can light other candles, whatever metaphor you choose, but something like that. The best I can do is to just to be the best version of myself, because in that case, worst case scenario is I've lived a healthy life, you know, and best case scenario, maybe it inspires people to also live a healthy life. And by that, you know, we have more and more light, and darkness is simply an absence of light. So it naturally just goes away. So yeah, my thing would be to keep practicing and to help others also, you know, become a light unto themselves.
Thank you, Bhaskar. And you and I had a beautiful conversation on the weekend about, you know, when we are actually physically well, we actually emit more light. You know, we have more joy coming out of us. We have more impact on people. Not only are we more effective doing it, we're also emitting more, because you just feel, you know, it's rare that somebody that feels really great about themselves goes on and creates darkness for others. Usually we have a tendency to share our well-being. So thank you, Bhaskar, for this wisdom. So now I'd like to go to Anneloes. You know, what is something, Anneloes, we can do as a collective humans, you know, to empower all of us to thrive?
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you also for what you've woven together, you know. And you were, Stefan, you mentioned about the ancient wisdoms. Mm-hmm. So I had that question as well in my heart about 20 years ago, and it led me to go to Australia and to be there for at least 8 years to learn from the Australian Aborigines, because they do represent, you know, the longest continuous living culture. And so I felt like, okay, before we go and try to reinvent the wheel, you know, what did they do as a practice, and how did they create thrivable communities? And also by understanding the impacts that there were from, of course, the colonial times on them, I started to understand even better what the fundamentals are. And they brought that together in a teaching called Kanjini, which is kind of loosely translated as love with responsibility. And Kanjini rests on 4 foundations, 4 dimensions, 4 key principles. And the first one is about our relationship with the land. So that wherever you are, even if the land on which you're living right now is not the land on which you were born, this land is supporting you. So the first kind of dimension of thrivability is really to connect deeply with the spirit of the land, to honor the land on which you are, and to really honor and work with the land for your thrivability and our collective thrivability. Yeah? The second one is about relating with life as family. So to understand that we are all members within a larger family of life. So how can we be a really good relative? And that we then start to realize that our relatedness is not just as human beings, but it's also, we are relatives also of the animals, of the plants, of the trees, the insects, the rocks, the stones. Yeah? So to relating with life as family. And when we do that, we start to shift this kind of consumption mentality. So we no longer look at using resources to consume and get energy, but we start to see that there's a reciprocity and there's a mutuality in life. Yeah, so that as we honor the whole also honors us. And then the third dimension of Kanjini is about our spirit, about our soul, our unique essence, and to really be able to live a life that brings forth our soul, that brings forth our spirit, and to honor the same in others, as foundation for thrivability. And then the fourth dimension is our connection with what they call the sacred laws, the dreaming, to understand that there are universal principles that are given. Yeah, these are not something that are man-made, and they're also not principles that man can manipulate. But when we start to understand these principles and we work with these principles, then, as Michelle also beautifully said, is that life knows how to thrive. Yeah, what we merely do is really work to create the conditions for that thrivability to emerge. And that's based off understanding these sacred principles and these universal principles. So this is, a wonderful practice, and that really it starts with ourselves, and then ourselves with the land, and our relations with each other, our relations with the larger world, our relations also across time and space, and our relationship with the larger cosmos as a whole. When you truly nurture and you honor each of those dimensions of being within yourself, within your community, with each other, the thrivability does arise. It is there. Yeah? And then finally also another practice and a message that the elders shared with me is that if every person goes home to bring healing to their family and starts to connect also with their parents and their grandparents and honor their ancestors, and we do our healing in our own community, it's amazing how things can change. And what we can see already in many of our communities, there is a little mini world, especially now also when there is more migration between people. Yeah, so we have a little international, even in our little communities, where we can really celebrate the diversity of who we are. Yeah, so that's practice of Kanjini, love as caretakers with responsibility for our collective well-being.
Thank you.
And Stefan, we love to hear from your wisdom now as well. So, from everything that we shared so far, and you have such a deep commitment also to conscious leadership. What do you really feel? What is the relationship between conscious leadership and really stewarding this collective thrivability? How do you live that?
Obviously, I was not born into the conscious leadership bucket. I used to be, for most of my career, a typical capitalist, running big organization, making lots of money for my organization. I used to build planes for the richest people in the world. And then along the way, the universe played its game. I got many crises, and I transformed myself, and then I transformed business. And for me now, where I stand, it's all about consciousness. Everything is a reflection of the state of consciousness. Love is a state of consciousness. Hate is a state of consciousness. And to me, I've studied the models of Carl Jung. There's only two basic emotions: love or fear. I choose to live in the state of love, as much as I can. And every morning I get up, my intention is unconditional love for myself and everyone that I encounter, but also the whole world. And so I go into the sphere of love and consciousness. That's what and I guess my research has proven that, that's what the quantum physicists believe. That's what the very spiritual people believe. Life is really about love and consciousness. So my quest is to be a catalyst for the transformation of leaders. I choose to go in leadership because that's where I come from. But I coach many people, and some of them are not officially leaders, but they're leading themselves. As soon as you get up in the morning and you choose to leave your house, you're in leadership position. You influence other people, mostly with your way of being, much more than what you say. And so I am on constant transformation myself. So I'm doing I guess I used to say I don't have a PhD like you have, Anneloes, but I have a PhD in suffering, which means I have a PhD in transformation. Because once you decide to transform, life will throw you the challenges to transform. And now I know I'm on the right path because the challenges come faster, much faster, and I recover much faster. So I'm rising. So in summary, it's about elevating our own consciousness as leaders, as people that want to affect positive change in the world. And by who we are now, by who we are vibrating at, by what consciousness level we're operating at, we can help other people rise. Just with who we are, because we're from a different point of view, from a different awareness, from a different consciousness, different words, different action, different behaviors, different energy. So some days I'm really, really sad about the fate of humanity. And then I shake myself up and I said, I see what Bhaskar is seeing. I see what Michelle's seeing. I see what you see. I actually think that we are going to make it by a rise of consciousness. And I studied recently what happened at the Renaissance. I think it was a rise of consciousness after what happened in the Dark Ages. So I think we can do it again. But honestly, I don't think we're doing it fast enough. So my quest is to allow everyone to raise consciousness, because it's just a better ride. In this life, you have a better ride. It's much more fun when you operate from a higher level of consciousness. But also, I think this is how we're going to transform ourselves and humanity. So I'm, deeply committed to it. I have no idea if it's the right answer, but that's my answer. And it's been my answer for many years now. And it sounds really good for me. Thank you for asking me the question. So now it'd be fun to hear from the people on the line that have listened very patiently and carefully to share questions, interaction, feedback, what is present for you. And it's your chance to also ask questions to our guests or to myself if you feel like it. So, just go as you wish. Just unmute yourself and be welcome to ask your question.
Okay, I'll go ahead and I'll ask something. So in my research, I've been doing this for almost 6 months now, where I'm also providing coaching to a lot of women who feel that they don't have a voice in the workplace or don't know how to basically balance, like they say, their femininity with the masculinity energy that they need for the workplace. So what I hear a lot of times with my clients is that they're fearful. I myself also experiencing that, where I have all the building blocks ready to launch, and instead of launching at 70% of perfection, it has to be 100%, right? So we hear more and more people are fearful to make these transformations. So what would be something that you could say to somebody who would like to perhaps make the changes but is afraid to do so? Leaving comfort zones are very difficult, and leaving old habits are very difficult.
So, does one of you guys want to answer? Michelle, Bhaskar, or Anneloes? Please feel free. Or
I'll give it a try, Jennifer. Thank you for your lovely question. Hello.
Hi.
I definitely feel what you said. There's always that initial fear of how I'll be received, will it be good enough? For me, the shift came when I realized that it has nothing to do with me. When something is so compelling, it is beyond, how I may be appearing to other people, because it's just such a compelling purpose. So that heroic cause is front and center, and all we're doing is kind of shedding a light on it and serving it. So I think one way is to shift the focus from the I to the is. What is this cause that is so compelling that just gives you so much passion and drive, and you almost forget that there is an I personality out there. You're just so committed, and it's such a joyous commitment towards this shared purpose. So that's one thing, to really be almost lost in the purpose where the I disappears. And the other thing is that I know obviously we have gone way in the spectrum of the masculine, the whole thinking and logic and physicality, and it's really time for the pendulum to swing. And I will say that from a yogic perspective, the solution is not masculine or feminine. It is in being an optimum human being. And an optimum human being, a healthy human being, has intelligence, has compassion, has drive, has grace, has all those qualities. So I think, when we find that balance, we'll come to a place where we realize that it's really, as Martin Luther King says, the content of character that matters most.
Thank you. Great answer.
I can add something as well. Hi, Jennifer. My experience is that people are secretly more ready for change than they admit. And it's surprising, and that's been my experience over 20 years. I've noticed in the last 3, I've noticed a steady shift, but it's just taking off, that people are looking for more meaning in their work, looking for opportunities to shift things. And if one brave person will just open the door a crack, others will follow. So there's some reassurance in that. And it doesn't have to be a full-on evangelism, that you should recommend. But I'm a big fan, as I've said, of questions, not forcing, but inviting. This is something that really can only be invited, and that's true of life in general. So asking people what they care about and what do they see as possible. So it comes from them. It's not something that is foisted and forced onto them. So the more that your clients can explore and invite with others, engage, rather than trying to sell something that might hit resistance, that ought to work. But to have the courage to know other people are waiting for somebody to step forward with the courage to ask those questions.
I had a question.
I'd like to add to that as well. You want
Michelle
to ask first?
Sorry, Anneloes, and then we'll go to you, Omar. Go ahead.
So another thing, especially with a lot of the women that I work with as well, when the fear comes up, it's often because there are certain expectations, and there's expectation of, wanting to be accepted, or they have these questions in their mind: am I saying the right thing? And what I often remind people is, be like a child. Let us go into this journey really as explorers. Give yourself the opportunity to experiment. And when we, as children, explore and we experiment, we are not busy with, am I going to give the right answer? We are really deeply immersed in the journey itself. And when you go into the journey as a process, then you start to more and more gain that trust that the answers that we seek are coming out of the process. They're not coming out of set goals that we mentally set. Yeah, it builds a much deeper sense of confidence that is not based on doing things right, but it's really based on a deep engagement with life.
Thank you, Anneloes. So we'll go to you, Omar, for your question.
Yes, thank you, Stefan. So I actually want to just take the opportunity to really thank everyone for sharing your wisdom and time. This is not like my first time to participate, and I find them very helpful. So thanks for that. Thanks for organizing this. So what I wanted to share is I wanted to talk about the aspect of adding value. And one interesting thing that, and that's, I'm always really in specific interested to things that Bhaskar was sharing in terms of his experience. The one thing that I think I'm doing differently on my side, which Bhaskar spoke about today as well, was really avoiding having a negative circle around you and always including yourself in something that will be energetic and something that will enable you to be the best you, the best version of yourself. So the thing that is happening with me is that I'm feeling that when I'm involving myself with the negative circle, with those people who are very negative and require someone like me to come with a positive attitude, is what's really adding value to me, and is the one thing that when I'm working with, let's say in my workplace, I'm finding that when I'm associating myself with these people who have a lot of positive mentality, great attitude, it's good. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel I belong. But when I'm really happy and I'm finding that I'm going back home and feeling that I added so much value, is when I pass by an office and hear someone saying, oh, this guy Omar's approach is always adding value, he's always great, even though everything is a mess. So that adds a lot of value to me, I think, when I'm searching and associating myself to the negative circle and making an impact there. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar, for sharing that. And I've been a teacher of meditation and yoga in companies for over a decade now, almost 2 decades. And I totally see how that is. Some places it just uplifts you, and some places you're the light kind of a thing. And my take on that is if you can help the situation, go ahead and you do your thing. But if there's some situations where it's just an energy like a black hole, they're just sucking it out of you. Nothing good is coming out of it. There are some people that are really like energy vampires almost, and there's some psychological game they're playing because it gives them attention or whatever it might be. And there's a discernment of, am I really adding value here, or is this just just sucking up my attention and my lightness? So it's that if you can help an environment, absolutely, go ahead and obviously Omar adds value. That's a wonderful reason to live, actually. Yet if you find that it's just draining your battery and not serving any meaningful purpose, and you can feel that it's a physiological thing, and when you feel that this is just not the right environment, as soon as you recognize that, as soon as there's awareness of that, funny thing happens. Life just arranges itself where you no longer have to be in that kind of environment, So yeah, it might be that your circle of friends and colleagues might change as you very, willingly look for uplifting company. And that discernment of knowing if adding value or not will sharpen with experience.
Thank you very much, Bhaskar.
There's a really cool question here from Uman, so I'm going to repeat it. And I would love some of our three.
Stefan, could I just comment for a moment on on Omar's question too? Do we have time for that?
What do you think I'm going to say? No, obviously you can.
So I work with a framework in organizational context that's based on the characteristics and conditions that living systems need to thrive, and for individuals to thrive, to bring as much of their life as possible. I work with three conditions. They are mastery, membership, and meaning. So it sounded as if Bhaskar was talking most of all about membership. How do we feel with the people around us? And Omar, you mentioned that they're nice people and I feel good. So it satisfies that aspect of my need. I feel a sense of membership. But then you also have the need for a feeling of mastery. I bring something important. I contribute something that only I can bring. It's not just that I can do a repetitive job that anyone else could do, but I'm like a master craftsman. And I bring something special, and I'm always learning as well, in that a master craftsman is never finished learning. So mastery and membership is really powerful. And if we can find meaning as well in our work and in our collectives and our experience with others, then we really feel fully alive and thriving. So I think that might be an additional set of characteristics to cultivate in your life and in your surroundings.
Thank you, Michelle.
Michelle.
Sure.
So the question from Uman is very, very interesting to me. So he says, I feel that all disruption to the flow of life emanates from worshiping a specific form, often the form of the human body, as if life can be visually perceived and touched. We talk so much about life, but who can verbally articulate what life really is? And how can we be confident about what life does when we have no clue what life is? So does one of our three guest speakers want to volunteer an answer to that? What is life?
There's a trap in that, because if I were to answer the question, I would have to separate myself from life. And I don't experience any duality with life. So there is no me that can answer what is life. I don't define life. Life is asking itself that question. You're alive too. Yeah. Life is not something that there. Yeah. So I can fully be with you in the experience of life as life right now. And for me, life is so sacred that it is something that I don't want to trap it into words. Yeah. Just now we have defined it, and therefore now we know what it is. I love the mystery of life. I love the unknown. I also love Buddha's wisdom of that there are certain sets of unanswerable questions. And there's an old teaching around that the Buddha shared when he was asked a similar question, and he answered with silence. So
but could
right
it
now,
be an illusion that everything is life? Like I think what Unan was pointing, it's not limited to humans. Yeah. Life is everywhere.
Of course not. Yes.
It's everywhere.
Maybe Stefan, what the one word I think about when we talk about life, I just think it's a platform. A platform for us to have magic, for us to have love, to have experiences, to have a lot of these things, to be curious, to be all of these things. So I think life, in simple terms, is a platform for us to be human, for animals to live on here as well, for for nature, for a lot of these things. It's a platform.
I would like to add something too. And I see that human is writing essence, practicality, sincerity, energy.
Spaciousness.
Yeah, exactly. And those really do connect with how I think of life. I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday who was saying, are you sure we should mention life? And won't it turn people away because we can't agree to a certain definition? Or what if other people hear us talking about life and we think they know what we mean, but they have a much smaller definition than we do. And I had a few things to say about this. One was it's not necessary to define life in very concrete terms, but it is necessary to acknowledge it. I talk about the difference between me and my car, and we know there's a difference. We don't know exactly where that difference comes from or what exactly it is, but we know that there is a difference. And that difference brings about creativity, generativity, regenerativity. Living systems can heal themselves, can create new forms of life, can innovate. Our aliveness allows us to be passionate, to be friends, to comfort each other, to feel joy. So those are desirable characteristics, and life does all of that by itself, without a manager, without an engineer. And this is critically important for shifting into a more useful story, to recognize that we need to create the conditions for life to self-integrate, self-organize, self-manage. So it shifts from being managers and engineers and controllers to being stewards and gardeners. And my response to my friend yesterday about people having a smaller understanding was that it's okay that's all right. Maybe they'll find their way to a deeper understanding through the practices that we propose, practices of more meaningful conversation or of being together in more thrivable ways. But the most important thing is we do need to acknowledge life. Otherwise, we stay in our mechanistic story where we're controlling everything.
What I learned from hanging around you three wise people, especially the two women on staff here, is about what thriving really means. And the whole, I'm getting my own conclusion. Why is one life more worth than another life? Why is a human life worth more than nature's life? And I think in my quest to raise consciousness is we realize that we're all part of the same one entity, one mega organization. Then we start to honor all lives. Why is the life of a CEO more important than the life of an employee? Why is the life of a human more important than the life of a cow or a pig? Why is nature? So this, I think the question that Noonan asked and also you guys answer brings to this. It's actually limitless. Life is limitless. And so I love, Michelle, when you remind me all the time, let's honor life. And then move, maybe nobody asked a question, but maybe you guys can help me answer that. I learned from you that leadership is really good. I worked all my life to be a great leader. Now I'm discovering that leadership is actually limiting. There's other levels of leadership that are called stewardship, custodianship. So I'm endeavoring to inquire those. You want to add? Maybe Anneloes and Michelle, a bit of to that color, Do you guys want to talk about stewardship and custodianship?
Yeah, custodianship and stewardship is really, it's the deepest caretaking for life, indeed, in its healthy expression. I just want to add one thing, and yes, Aman, I love that you raised the question. I really appreciate that. If I don't put it in box, it's simply because of my love for life. In the same way that I wouldn't want to define any human being either. But is that even the cars that we create, even the computers, even the technology, we have created that with life. So there is nothing that is outside of life. Everything, every thought that we're having, everything that we're also bringing forth, we've done that with life. We are life, as life. And so in the consciousness of stewardship and custodianship, we have a very, very deep, very integral, very large vision that we really, and a humility that we don't place ourselves as human beings on the top of a hierarchy, but we see ourselves as embedded within a larger web of life, a living system, and that we understand that to honor the whole is to honor every part of it, and to honor every part of it is to allow the health of the whole. So it's that deep relationship of that, again, that reciprocity, that mutuality, that deep love and care. And maybe Michelle would like to add to that as well.
Thank you. In my book, I talk about stewardship as the combination of reverence and responsibility. And I think reverence is something that's really missing in our lives, in our world right now. Reverence for something that is alive. And when we really recognize the life in something, in a child, in a community, in a garden, then we know that it's beyond our understanding, beyond our control. It has potential that may or may not be fully realized, depending on the conditions that we might help create. So it's worthy of reverence. We are worthy of reverence, each of us. The fact that we are alive. I sometimes invite people to feel the pulse in your throat, and it's amazing that it continues, empowers you, propels you your entire life. So reverence. And despite the fact that we can't control, we can't fully understand, we feel called, we feel an urge to care. We feel a sense of responsibility for something that is alive. And we don't feel that as fully when something is not alive, when it's just a machine or an inanimate object. And so that's, to me, the definition of stewardship, when that combination comes together of reverence and responsibility. And it doesn't mean only rainbows and unicorns. And what I mean by that is that death and decay and compost are part of the cycle of life as well. And sometimes stewardship calls for decisiveness and direct action and even letting things die. So it's really tending to the bigger picture of the ability to thrive over time of the system that we're dealing with.
You know, somebody was telling me last night, Michelle, that, you know, consciousness is in everything, including machines, because they're conceived from consciousness. And there was an experiment with a robot and baby chickens. And after a while, the robot, it was, even though it was not supposed to, was going towards the baby chickens. It's like they were now part of the same entity. I didn't see the experiment, but I see what you mean about organizations being seen as machines. But I think, I mean, maybe we can see that we can find consciousness everywhere. And so there's a question I was asking, Bhaskar and I were asking each other on the weekend. I was asking him, but I was really asking myself too. Who do we need to become to realize what our greatest ambitions are? And, you know, having you three here with me on this call, it's obvious that we all want humanity to thrive and all species to thrive. You know, we want all life to thrive, to take, you know, humans. So who do we need to become? Like, I'm working really hard on me, and I think life is giving me my own challenges, but also has brought me you three wise people to coach me on a regular basis. So maybe we can ask this question to all of us online, including the participants. Who do we need to become as one piece of the whole for humanity, for, you know, for all life to thrive? Does anybody want to give a crack at that? Bhaskar, I'm going to ask you. Who do you need to become for your mission, but also for your impact on humanity?
I'd like to respond to this by first suggesting something called layers of truth. And there are definite layers of truth that we can all sort of point to. At one layer of truth, we have to become the, you know, as healthy as possible, body, mind, and spirit. That's one layer of truth, you know, so that our body and mind are at an optimum condition to serve a greater purpose. There's a deeper level of truth that Anneloes and Michelle are pointing to, which is a collective fabric of consciousness that we all belong to. And the recognizing of that. And the recognizing of that is not an intellectual, emotional, or devotional recognizing. It's an experiential recognizing. When you actually know that you belong to something much bigger than this individualized, isolated state of I, something remarkable starts to happen. We move from fear from scarcity to realizing that we are so much bigger. There's this beautiful little anecdote that I just share with you about this man who goes to a Zen monk, Zen master, and starts complaining about his life. His boss is mean, his girlfriend disrespects him, and so on and so forth. And the Zen master sort of walks with him around the corner, and he has a glass and a fist of salt with him. And he says, here, take a fistful of salt in this water and drink it. So he puts the fistful of salt in a glass of water, drinks it, and it tastes disgusting, and he spits it out. And then there's a lake in front. So he says, now throw the salt into the lake and then take some water and drink it. So he did the exact same fistful of salt in the lake, took the water, drank it. How does it taste? It tastes very sweet, very pure, very fresh. So what's the difference? So the idea here being that the fistful of salt are the problems that are, you know, that our small self kind of identify with. And what we're changing is the context, you know, from being a small glass of water to being this huge, beautiful lake. So when you connect with the bigger tapestry at play, suddenly your problems are not that a big deal, and you become a part of something much more magnificent. And really the only suitable response is awe, that you belong to something so incredible. And it's almost as if you allow life to move through you, and you don't jam up the signal so much with fear, insecurity, doubt, etc. So that's the level of truth. I believe that once we become, just sort of remove our programming, our beliefs, ideas, philosophies, and that's a process, really. For me, it's been a process of practice. When you see clearly what's going on, then we can move into the next level of truth, that we are actually much grander than a tiny glass of water.
You know what emerged for me when you spoke, Bhaskar? You said many things, but one word is humility. Because they say that to rise in consciousness, the feeling of awe, AWE, that you see the magnificence of it all, then you become really humble, and then to me you honor it, you respect it, you say, wow. I was telling someone the other day that in each of us there's 31 trillion cells. We were conceived from 2 cells, hopefully out of love. And I think when Michel talks about a garden, no garden will ever produce vegetables or fruits if it's not cared for, if it's not loved, So I think humility, I think, is important. Like I got that for me. I need to be humble for me to become who I need to become. So maybe anyone, our speakers or anyone on the line. Omar, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question, or you're okay with the text now? Okay. So anyone else want to ask, give a comment to that question? Who do we need to become? No?
Maybe there's one thing I'd like to add to that, because especially in our Western societies, there's a lot of emphasis on, really almost like pumping yourself up to mastery, to skills, so there's a sense of false control, It's like, okay, if I do this and I do that, I'm going to be my best self, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that, it's going to be recognized. Whereas for me, the ultimate surrender into that question, I think it's a wonderful question you asked, Stefan, is grace. It's, yes, we do our best, but in the end there is this surrender to how the source of life brings us forth. Yeah. And so to me, the ultimate in the becoming, there's an initiation I went through when I was living in Australia, and I can't share all the details, but it was based on, it's like you are eaten up by the serpent, the rainbow serpent. And then you go through this whole process of deconstructing all your self-created perceptions and realities. And then you're being put back together by the universe and then kind of spit out again to go, okay, you go back into society, you're back into life, So that point where you put back together, you let go of trying to control who you need to be. You kind of trust that there's a universal wisdom there that actually knows who you are, where you're meant to be, and assembles you in those ways. And that's an ongoing process. There's an ongoing process of death, birth, rebirth. Yeah. And that what we are now for this stage, the next stages that are calling for us may actually ask us to give birth to new qualities of ourselves that we haven't even explored yet. Yeah? So if I'm going to be focused on, I have to become this, whereas life and a deeper wisdom of life will actually know, well, yeah, that's nice for that stage. But it's actually not going to, help you to where we are going now. Yeah. Therefore, yeah, I really trust in a deep evolutionary wisdom in how it brings me forth. And that's what for me grace is about.
Mm-hmm. And I can add, in answer to the question, who do we need to become? I would add playful as we move into more and more complex and uncertain times. There was a quote I came across yesterday that play is the state in which uncertainty is fun. It's just such a wonderful concept. Rather than being fearful, it can be fun. And play is not the opposite of work. We make a big mistake in believing that play is the opposite of work. Play is the best way we get work done. It's the highest form of work. It's the best way that we innovate and collaborate and open ourselves to inspiration. So the more that we can create the conditions for play, the more we're creating the conditions for life. And this is part of the answer to the question about, Jennifer, I think it was you, the women clients and their fear. The more that the culture is one of playfulness, the less we have to be afraid about proposing new things. So the more we can be playful, the more we invite life.
I think you might know this, Michel. Do you know who my most, you guys are all very wise, but my most powerful teacher is? It's my dog. Because it's always in play. He lives in a moment. He teaches me unconditional love and presence. I'm making a joke, but I'm not making a joke. I learned so much from my dog, and I know you have a dog too. Because I have a tendency, because of my mission, I guess in life in general, to be a bit too serious. And I think when you're in play, there's a whole new sphere in your psychology that opens up. There's a bit less pressure, and maybe humanity's in trouble, but it may not die tomorrow. There's a few more days to go before everything happens. So thank you for bringing that playfulness. Maybe one last chance for everyone to ask a question. Then we're gonna go into the wrap-up stage. So anyone would like to ask another question or make a comment? Everyone that's been quiet? No? Okay, so then I'm gonna ask you a question. I would love for some of you to share is from this call and all the insights and all the sharing that have been shared from our speakers, but also through the very profound questions from you guys, the participants. What did you receive from this call that you feel you can apply in your life and in your leadership? Anything you would like to mention? Jennifer, it looks like you have something to say. No?
Yes. So for me, what resonated with all of this, it was very revolutionary for me, because my whole blog and podcast is exactly about the need for success. I'm saying women, but in general, for people to become more playful, to go back to the basics, to find their own self in this big, noisy world. So I loved everything that I heard. I took note of a lot of things, and it was a great panel. Maybe one day you can come on my podcast. And yeah, so for me, really what resonated was the whole playfulness, the layers of truth. Absolutely, that's something I've touched upon in my own research. And yeah, great job, really, very inspiring.
I'm going to speak for all of us without asking them permission, but we're all available if you want us to come on your podcast. So everybody online there is all committed to share the wisdom. So
absolutely, that would be great. I'm getting it trademarked, and then once it does, then I can give you the name.
No problem.
Right.
Anyone else would like to share the answer? What did you receive from this call that you intend to apply in your life?
Yeah, Human, you can speak. Mute yourself.
No, I think he wants to type.
No, I didn't know how to unmute.
Okay, here you are.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I heard this message of work as play for a long time, maybe 2 years, and I've been grappling with it. I felt there's an energy in it, but I've never been able to make any sense out of it. It was such a contradiction. And I just wanted to share that when Michelle spoke about it, it just penetrated and it sank in, and I'm very thankful. That's all.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I got the same feeling. That's why I went back to my dog. I said, this is my example. So thank you. Go ahead.
Maybe I should add. Okay, forget it.
You can go ahead, Una.
No, I was gonna say that when taking stuff literal is taking on an extreme intensity, then it doesn't make any sense anymore, because the proportion in the relationship between who cares and who is stuck totally goes out the window, and it loses vitality, and language doesn't carry any essence anymore, and it's just everything is frightening and confusing, because the meaning of what means all that, where's the meaning coming from? The labels are there, but there's nothing defining that, and dysfunction happens.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anyone else? Last call.
Hi, Stefan. It's Patricia.
Hi, Patricia.
I've been taking all of this wonderful wisdom. Thank you so much, everyone. I was thinking there's so much wisdom, but there was one thing that Anneloes said that stood out to me, that we need to treat each other like family, like one big human family. And I think that we need more of that. And I certainly I've communicated that in my work on the aspect of learning, like it's learning communities, but it's, community, it reaches so many different aspects of life. So if we can get back to that, I think that will help us to thrive. And also just another comment about how it can feel overwhelming sometimes when you realize there's so many challenges in the world, and it's just overwhelming on a global scale. And I remember I went to a silent retreat last year, and I remember asking the teacher about that, like, what do you do when you know that you become aware of all of these challenges and you want to do something to help? It can feel overwhelming. And she said that now we're exposed to so much more information than we ever were before with the media and everything. We're constantly being bombarded with information and bad news, predominantly in the media. And she said back in the day, we only were part of communities of about 150 people. So if we can just help the 150 people around us, that's what we should focus on, because that's all that we can really do. So I thought that was kind of a good perspective, that I can only do so much in my community, and I'll try to do beyond that. But yeah, otherwise it can get really overwhelming. So,
thank you, Patricia. So just to conclude, I would ask our three guests, starting with Michelle, then Bhaskar, then Anneloes, to share maybe their remaining, tiny bit of wisdom, as a parting gift to the people. What would they recommend people do to help them contribute to thriving for humanity? So maybe with you, Michelle, start first.
Okay. What comes to mind is to look for gratitude. Look for the things that you're grateful for, because that's a good sign that there's life, there's generosity, there's generativity, and it's an easier practice than you might think. Bhaskar and I had a wonderful gathering with Stefan actually two weekends ago to explore the practice of generosity, and it was so rich and so powerful, and it really solidified for me the connection between generosity and generativity and thrivability. So look for the gratitude and generosity in your life.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Bhaskar?
Well, I'll end by taking a crack at this question: what is life? By human. It's a very human question, a perennial human question. And of course, different layers of truth. But one way that I really like looking at life is the understanding that I came into this life empty-handed. I'm going to leave it empty-handed. In the middle, all I have are a bunch of experiences. And to me, a successful life is a life with pleasant experiences, good for myself and good for others. So there comes my practice of it. When I'm in a better physical, mental condition, I feel good. I'm better for others as well. So to see life as really experiences, and to really have a refined, sensitive understanding of what is a pleasant experience, a genuinely pleasant experience. And that goes hand in hand with the understanding that I find very powerful, is that our most precious commodity is our attention. It's not time or money. We don't vote with our ballot box. We vote with our attention. So what are we attending to? So this is a good practice. Where's our attention going? Because we're literally voting with that. So these are the two things I'd like to leave with: to have a happy life with good experiences, and to vote wisely with our attention.
Thank you. Anneloes?
Start your practice of care with what you can care for. So start with the simplicity. And Nelson Mandela, when he was in prison, he took care of little plants. And by taking care of that plant every day, he kept, as he said, his mind free. Yeah? And he stayed connected with life. So start by taking care of what you can take care of. With all the little things that are there. Even if it's as basic as yourself and your body, your family, your community. Really be attentive to that, because indeed, if we put our focus on all the really, really big issues, we can also lose focus on on the basic, and we create these conscious, loving, caring communities by the foundations is by taking care of what we can take care of right here, right now.
Thank you. And my answer to that, my parting wisdom is, I recommend to everyone on this call and all humans to fall in love with themselves first, because I've found that we cannot love others more than we love ourselves. And if we truly love ourselves, we'll be in a giving mode instead of a taking mode. But to also fall in love with all life, to go in that state that Bhaskar talked about, to see the beauty in everyone and in everything, because there is beauty everywhere. And I work mostly in the world of business. And I think if people can recognize the beauty of nature, for example, they will stop polluting it. If they can recognize the beauty of the people that work for them, they will start hurting their psychological well-being, for example. So my advice is to fall in love.